welcome to another episode of the Instant Impact Podcast. All right, so I have a little bit of a confession to make, actually kind of a big confession. Last fall, I was celebrating, 6 months of having the podcast out and feeling really good about that. And I was looking back on my past episodes, and I have loved each and every guest I've had on. I feel like there have been so many great conversations and insights, and hopefully, if you've been listening for a while, you feel that way too, or if you are new here, welcome. But one of the things that suddenly became glaring to me as I look back was how similar everyone looked to me who I had had on as a guest. And what was interesting to me about it was that was not intentional. It was literally just the people I knew and the people I was getting introduced to in my network. And it was this kind of this aha moment of, maybe it hasn't been intentional that I haven't had a huge diversity of guests in terms of ethnicity and background, especially ethnicity. But that's the problem, is that I wasn't being intentional about it. And so I've had some incredible people in my network who have helped support me in just finding really incredible guests who do have that more diverse background. And our guest today is absolutely phenomenal. And I actually wanted to have her on to talk about diversity and inclusion, and how, as entrepreneurs or small business owners, or maybe you're in charge of marketing at your organization, or you're building your personal brand and you're marketing yourself, how we can be more present and present to the need for diversity and inclusion in our marketing, and how we can be more inclusive in who we speak to and who we work with. And so this is a really important conversation. I'll be honest, there are parts of it where I felt uncomfortable asking the questions, just because I think some of it can be a loaded conversation. And my guest today, Brittany Cole, is just such a pro and a whiz at helping people navigate through their journey to be more diverse and inclusive in their marketing. And so Brittany, you'll love learning from her. She's a former corporate powerhouse, has just amazing background in the corporate space. And then she started her new company, Career Thrivers, and she helps organizations with diversity and inclusion, specifically within their internal team. But she came on and she talked about all the different, basically kind of breaking down first, what is diversity and inclusion in our marketing and how can we be more intentional about it. She talks about how to have tough conversations if we realize that we do need to be more intentional and we're not sure where to start. She's going to give you some tips on some really strategic, actionable things you can do today if this hasn't been your main focus, but you're realizing now that it needs to be, or needs to be one of your focuses for this year for marketing. And I learned so much from her. I know you're going to learn a ton as well. And I'm just really, really excited to have her on here. And I'll also say, just for you listening, please know that I am wanting to be more intentionally inclusive and diverse with my guests, with the topics, with the thoughts that are brought on this show. So if you or someone you know who is a good representation of that, please reach out. You can just email Elyse at ElyseArcher.com, and I would love to hear your suggestions on guests for the show as we do work to just be more inclusive and shine a light on more people whose voices really need to be heard in this space. So without further ado, and with that said, I am so excited to welcome Brittany Cole to the podcast. Let's dive in. Brittany, I am so excited to have you on the podcast today. Thank you so much for being here. And this is going to be such an important conversation about diversity and inclusion in our marketing. And I am so grateful that you have made yourself available to have it. So welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Elyse. I'm super excited to share with your audience today and to really dive in about this topic. Super excited.
Well, when you and I first connected, I think I shared this with you, kind of the sheepish moment I had as I reflected. I think you and I connected maybe 6 months ago or so, which is hard to believe. It doesn't feel like it's been that long, but I know it's crazy. And I just been kind of looking back over my podcast guests, and I think every single person has had something really valuable to share. But as I look back on it, I had this moment of, oh my gosh, almost everyone who I've had on the podcast looks like me. And it had not been intentional. But when I realized that, it was like, wow, I haven't been intentional about making sure that there is diversity of thought, of opinions, of backgrounds, of ethnicities on the podcast the way that I would like to be. And so I am so grateful to be able to have this conversation, because I think sometimes it's not so much that we are intentionally biased, but it's that we're not intentional about bringing in that diversity of thought and background into just our platforms and our marketing, whether we have a podcast or our workforce, like you work with companies on. And so I'm ready to learn everything from you about.
I don't know everything. Well, I won't set the bar quite that high, but I'm happy to share what I learned. And I think you've already hit the nail on the head with the word that you're using. It's about being intentional.
Yeah.
It is definitely an intentional act. So I'm excited to share.
Yeah. How did you get into this work? I know you help a lot of companies and workforces bring in a diverse talent and make sure that their marketing is intentionally diverse as well. But kind of tell us your backstory and how you became passionate about this and got into this work.
Sure, sure. So my name is Brittany. Again, I have the pleasure of serving as the founder of Career Thrivers. So I lead a leadership development firm, and we work with organizations to help them to engage, develop, and retain diverse talent. So I got into this work by really growing up in corporate America. And so I started in corporate actually as an intern, had the pleasure of starting technically the summer after my sophomore year of undergrad. So I've had over a decade of experience in corporate, working in sales, working in marketing, working in the diversity and inclusion space with programming, working with ERGs as well as senior level leaders. And so it has truly been, I would say nowadays it's somewhat of a trend, but I believe it's a good one because there's this recognition that diversity is good for business. And it's not just recognition, like that's a fact. It's been proven time and time again in research. And so now companies are saying, okay, how do we reevaluate being intentional around diversity, knowing that not only is it good for business, but it's also great for culture?
Yeah. Well, and I'm curious to get your thought on this because it sounds like, what I was saying before about just lack of intentionality is a lot of times what causes it. But I think if we look at just so many companies marketing, like I've got a long background of working with companies, especially in the financial services space. And it is notorious. I think a lot of companies are doing better, but to look at the marketing, at the websites, at who's on it, and it's like, it's one type of person that they're targeting or speaking to or showing images of so often in their marketing. And is it lack of awareness? I think most of the time it's not intentional, but how does that happen?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of both, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
I like to try to ground these conversations in definitions because I think so often we kind of use this language interchangeably without really being on the same page about what the words mean. So three kind of big cornerstone definitions I think are important for this kind of conversation is the definition around diversity, inclusion, and equity, because sometimes we use those as synonyms and they're not. So diversity is difference. Difference can mean a lot of different things. That's why if you say the word diversity, you get a myriad of responses and reactions. So diversity is layered. You have primary diversity, which is the diversity that you can't change. So diversity of age, ethnicity, race, the diversity that we can see essentially. And then you have secondary diversity. So diversity of thought, those sorts of things, education. So typically what happens is when you are prioritizing primary diversity, you will naturally, as a result, see diversity in terms of those secondary measures. So diversity is difference simply. Inclusion, though, is intentional action to include that difference. So that's the distinction between those, because you can have difference within an organization or within your customer base, but how are you being intentional about including that difference, whether it be as a marketer, as a business owner, or as a business leader? And then equity, which I would say is the gold standard. It's the ideal state, but it's when you have outcomes that aren't determined by difference. And so I think to your question of, how do you get to a place where you look at a website and everyone looks the same, or in the work that I do, you look at an org chart and everyone looks the same. I think it's that intentional piece. It's about, if you're looking at your line of business and thinking about, who is my customer base, then asking the tougher question of, does my organization represent the customers and clients that I'm serving? And if they are, then I think the next question is there a potential to grow my customer base by being more intentional and being inclusive of the team that's leading the work. So I think those are, two really good questions to really ask, to say, okay, how are we being intentional about including difference?
That's so interesting. And I've never thought about it that way from a team perspective. And I know for our listeners, some are solopreneurs, some are leading a small team. Like I have a team of, 4 that I manage and lead on, and they're all remote. And then some are leading a massive organization. But even for myself, for my own hiring of my team, I've always just looked at qualifications. I haven't necessarily thought about I haven't thought about diversity when I've been hiring. And as I'm saying that out loud, it's like, gosh, I should be. And I just being quite candid, I haven't, but my customer base is pretty diverse. And so that's interesting, the discrepancy in that as well. So does it really start with, in your opinion, does it start with how we hire and then it kind of spreads out to our customers and to our marketing? Is that
I love that you asked that question. I would say no. So I
okay.
believe it starts with culture. I believe it starts with cultivating a culture within an organization where people, regardless of their difference, believe that they belong. Because what typically happens is you have business leaders that ask that question. They're like, oh, I looked around and had this epiphany one day. Everyone looks the same. Let's go out and recruit. Well, then you recruit difference, but you can't retain them because the culture isn't such that they believe that they belong in that space. So I believe it starts with culture, with whatever your team looks like right now. What are the conversations around diversity and inclusion? How are you being intentional about including difference in your marketing efforts? Even with, partnerships. Maybe I've worked with organizations when they're like, okay, I'm having a hard time finding diversity, which is a completely different conversation. Won't go down that rabbit hole. But, so Brittany, like what's the solution here? And I'm like, well, an option would be perhaps to partner with an organization that has diversity, or to partner with a diverse organization to really have that, not just diversity in terms of people that you see, but I think diversity of thought is so critical, because oftentimes you are leaving innovative ideas on the table because you don't see that diversity in the room. So yeah, I think it really starts with culture. And then once that culture starts to develop, then you can say, okay, now that we're going out and being strategic about actually recruiting diverse talent within the organization, making sure that there is an environment that is such that they will stay.
Wow. I love that way of thinking about it. And I think I don't know if everyone realizes how much they're leaving on the table when they don't have that diversity of background and thought. And I think, unfortunately, this is probably going to set some people off. I don't know, but it's kind of a loaded conversation, right? But hopefully we can just have it. And and you probably see this more than I do, but I think some people approach it from I just need to check the box type of standpoint versus, no, I'm actually leaving so many opportunities for new ideas, for innovation, for new products, for new services I'm leaving them on the table because I don't have that diverse culture and workforce within my organization. So it's like we're being hurt by it and don't even realize it if we're not being intentional.
Yeah. The research says 30% and growing. So there is a 30% difference in the bottom line of organizations that are diverse versus those that are not. Wow. So I would definitely say, like, if you're a bottom line person and you're like, what does this mean? I don't do a lot of work around the business case for diversity because I believe it's pretty clear.
Yeah, no kidding.
So I'm like, okay, we are beyond, is this good for business? It's been proven that it's essential for business, particularly, as we advance, we become more technologically savvy, as we become more open to working remotely, the kind of talent that you attract is going to be different. And so I think you have to really cultivate that culture where people believe, okay, like this is a place that I belong, and I don't just belong here, but I can thrive here.
Yeah, I love that. I'm curious to get your perspective, since you're a marketing expert and this is your space. And we at my company, we help people with their personal brand marketing. And one of the things that we do is create an avatar. So if someone's not familiar with that, it's basically like a person who, when you are doing your marketing, whether sending out an email or, social media post, you speak directly to that person in your marketing. And it does, if you have one person you're focused on speaking to, it can make for a more powerful communication because it creates that emotional bond with that person, right? If you're imagining like your favorite customer or your ideal client, and you speak directly to them, it's a heck of a lot easier than trying to
Sure.
speak to a broad audience. And with that being said, I'm just curious about your perspective on that, because from a marketing standpoint, it works pretty well. And I think we could run the risk, because usually it's like, what's the avatar's, ethnicity, age, background, all of those things. So we can run the risk of excluding all these other people who could be our customers. So
Sure.
what's your take on that?
Yeah, so it is definitely, as you said, a marketing principle to have an avatar. With, do you have an avatar and stick to it, or are you constantly testing? And so I believe that it's also a marketing principle to to test and learn, test and learn. And so I think that leaves room for the marketer or the business owner to say, okay, I think, this box is my customer. As I master that box, is there an opportunity for me to create an additional avatar to have a slightly different tweak on the messaging that I'm testing and learning from, to see, are there customers in a different segment that maybe I'm not capturing, or customers that are actually out there that have bought into my service or product, but I'm not speaking to them, I'm not serving them. So I think that really testing, and with social media now, there's so many really quick and fast ways to test copy, to test imagery, to do an A/B test on Facebook or Instagram to really see who's resonating with the message. And does that line up with the way that you've kind of formulated your marketing strategy, or do you need to be a bit more robust in that?
That's a really interesting way to think about it. It makes a lot of sense. So it sounds like it's like there's nothing wrong with having that primary avatar, but then also be open-minded to who else could it be, and having multiple avatars and doing the testing. What do you do? I mean, I guess it's just a matter of continuing to tweak, but what do you do if you put your messaging out there and try to test with a new avatar and it's just crickets? It's like, what you do is not resonating with this group of people. I'm just kind of thinking ahead, like what then? Is it changing copy, changing approach? What would you say?
Yeah, I would say it could be both of those things. So I'll give you an example just in kind of my own entrepreneurial
Sure.
story. So I started out doing image consulting. So I love the work that you do around visibility, because it plays such a huge role in career advancement, but then also in building a business. So I've always had a love for fashion. I was working in corporate America in the pharmaceutical industry, and I said, hey, I see women primarily. So this was my box, my avatar, that I believe could use my services relative to just feeling more confident because they look more put together. So I start image consulting. I'm thinking in my mind, right? Because oftentimes this initial phase, especially for small business owners, of getting to an avatar, okay, I don't want to hurt anyone's feelings, but oftentimes it's a
Do
best
it.
it is a
Lay it out.
best guess. Like it is,
Yeah.
there is like no science in it at all. There are organizations, and obviously bigger corporations like the one that I worked at, like we did research. So like this is a very, it's not just a guess. It's like we've talked to X number in qual, we've done quant. So we know, like, or we have a good sense of like, these are our people, or this is our person. But for small business owners, it's typically like, oh, I think da 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 da, whatever it is. And oftentimes it's based solely on our personal experience or people that are like us. So I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to attract women who, are going to a special event, or maybe they have a wedding or something like that. They want to, look really polished. And so they'll reach out. Well, that was the messaging and avatar that I had. But when I actually got out there in the market, what I was attracting was professional women, women who were looking to make a transition in their career, women that, would have me in a dressing room at a store or in the closet of their home and be pulling out their resume like, oh, by the way, can you take a look at this? Or I have a conversation coming up with my manager that I'm uncomfortable about. How do you think I should open it up? So I'm like, okay, I know in my mind the avatar that I've had for this business, but I see another opportunity. And so for me, I made the decision to pivot my business from rebranding it from Style by Brit to Career Thrivers, to going from image consulting to career coaching and consulting. So, and there's still, of course, an image consulting part in that I do with one-on-one clients, but that was me listening to the market and making a tweak in my business, because the opportunity wasn't exactly what I thought it was going to be in terms of my messaging. And so I had to make that change. And so I would say, as a business owner, particularly a solopreneur that is serving as not only the entrepreneur, but also as the marketer, you have to be flexible in that way, open to testing, learning, and making those pivots to make sure that your messaging and that avatar that you have in your mind really aligns with what the market's telling you.
Yes. Oh my gosh. What I love about that is there's no ego in it, right? Because we can get so attached. And this is speaking from personal experience. I have this idea that I think is great that of course everyone's going to want. And then you put it out there and it's just crickets. But if you, I think it's taking that step to put it out there and then listening for the feedback and making that really smart strategic pivot in terms of your avatar, your business model, just to really be of service. At the end of the day, that's what it's about. And I knew I remember now that your background was in image consulting. So you look so fabulous you guys need to watch the video of us and go on her website. If you, if you haven't, you've got like the best blazer collection. You always look so put together and so great. So yeah. So tell us, in terms of some of the mistakes that you see business owners making with their marketing, any major mistakes that you see in terms of messaging, positioning, visual. I just love to hear like the biggest mistakes that you see happening a lot of times.
Sure. I would say the probably the number one mistake that I see is business owners wanting to start from visuals and copy. So I have a program around personal branding that really talks about how do you ensure that you know the brand before you try to, what I think of as scaling it with digital. So I think you have to really have a strong understanding of what is your unique value proposition? How are you serving people? What are those services? What are those reasons to believe? How are you measuring that? What KPIs are you looking at to know if what you're putting out there is successful or not? And then once you are really, really clear on that, I see, particularly social media as a way that you scale that message so that you become really clear about what it is that you're putting out there, because it aligns with a really, really powerful why. And I find so often that business owners just want to start with the social media. They want to start with the page, start with the website, start with the logo, start with the colors. And it's like, there's been absolutely no thought in the strategy that should inform all of those creative assets, is what we would call it from a marketing standpoint. And so I think it's really kind of this balance of like making sure you're doing your due diligence on the education and strategy side to say, okay, what is it that I'm actually putting out in my marketing to inform the brand that I'm after? Because again, those two they're similar, but they're not exactly the same thing. So if you are trying to have customers and clients that have a certain belief, like what is that belief? Because that's your brand. Then you say, okay, what assets do I need to cultivate that belief with potential leads that then become customers? And so recognizing that in that, just like you said, there is no ego. Oh my goodness. If you are a business owner or you're thinking about entrepreneurship and you have an ego problem, this is not the industry for you. Like, literally every day I'm like, oh, I was wrong about that, pivoting here. Streamline that. Like it's just, it's not the space. If you can't be okay with, I thought this, but I was wrong.
Every single day. I'm glad it's not just me, right? Because it's every day is like a mirror of, oh, okay. Yeah, I think it's, what does my coach say? She says something like, gosh, entrepreneurship is basically, it's like the best personal development you could ever have. With some money attached if you do it right. So
absolutely.
Yeah. Well, and I'm glad you said that too, in terms of what the mistake is because I think a lot of times like the Instagram, the squeeze page, the logo, the copy, the colors, that's the sexy stuff that we want to jump to because you can see it and it feels tangible. Like, yes, I did something and I produced a result. But if there's not that strong foundation underneath it, when I'm talking with my clients, I usually compare it to like trying to build a house without having a blueprint. You can try and you can put some stuff up and you can hope it's going to come together, but ultimately you're going to have to tear it down because there was no strategic plan for how it's all going to fit together. So having that blueprint first is so key. What would you say? So this is so good and so helpful, and I'm so grateful for your insights here. If you were going to give somebody, let's say like 1 to 3 things they could do right now as an entrepreneur, as a business owner, someone who's marketing their business to really be more intentional about just being more inclusive in their marketing and their messaging, what would 3 steps be that we could take today to start being more inclusive there?
So, and I love this question because I'm all about implementation. So I would say, the first key is awareness. So really taking inventory. So kind of like you were like, oh, I kind of looked back at my podcast guests and they all look the same. Like what does it take for you to have that level of awareness, whether it's going through your website, going through your org chart, whatever it is, to say, okay, perhaps there's some opportunity for me. So I would say that that's definitely one. Then the second thing that I would say is as you're coming to this awareness of perhaps there's more I could be doing in the space, before you make a judgment about what you should do, go talk to those people or try to find people that you think, if you're a business owner, talk to someone that doesn't look like your average client. Have some of those, and you may be well into your entrepreneurship journey, but have some of those kind of intro conversations and interviews that you do when you're trying to really test your hypothesis for your business idea. But do that with people that look different than your customer to see, hey, perhaps there's an opportunity out here that I'm missing. If you're in an organization, like you mentioned financial services earlier. So I just came back from a financial services discovery meeting to do some diversity inclusion consulting with them. And they were talking about this exact topic that we're talking about now, of just like, there are things that we didn't realize until we talked to the diverse talent, because we thought we knew what their needs were, but what they said their needs were much different. So I would say have those conversations. And then the last, and I believe what is most important that we leave on the table, is making a commitment to take an action. So implement what it is that you've learned. I posted about this a little bit earlier today around organizations that start and stop with unconscious bias training. And unconscious bias training is great. It hits that number one, that awareness. So it helps you to be a little bit more cognizant of where you may have some bias. But then stopping there does nothing to change culture. You have to be committed to implement what you've learned so you can start to cultivate that culture where diverse talent can thrive if you're in the workplace, or where you grow your business with maybe a new segment of business that you haven't considered before, because you're now aware, but you didn't stop there. You actually decided to act, whether that's switching out a picture on, on a hero image of one of the pages of your website, or switching up some of the copy based on a conversation that you had, or whatever it looks like for you and your business. But those are 3 things that I would say are really important.
So helpful, so helpful. And I'm just curious for the second step about having the conversation and asking whether it's, somebody who doesn't look like your typical client, or maybe it's asking the more diverse talent on your team, like what can I do to be more inclusive? How do we have that conversation? Because I feel like I kind of fumble through it because I just don't know. Can you maybe share some pointers or some tips for how we can open up and what we can say in that conversation that doesn't leave us fumbling? Yeah.
Yes. So I would say, and I love this because I feel like it's so, it always leads up into a good conversation, but we have to be comfortable being uncomfortable. So typically, just like you said, like conversations around diversity, especially in a corporate setting, can sometimes make people so uncomfortable. And although I get that in my mind, at some level, I really don't. I'm like, okay, we've become aware that there's an opportunity here that we all see. It's clear as day. But yet we're all like super uncomfortable talking about it. Like we have to be comfortable. And even, my conversation earlier today was about ethnic diversity. So it's like, hey, we don't have any African Americans in our org chart at a certain level. And just being okay saying that, like we all see it. So be okay saying it. So I would say that's the first thing in terms of how do you have that conversation. And then I think the second thing, and these are really tips for me in terms of how do you have uncomfortable conversations. So I love a book that's behind me that I always recommend for conversations like this. It's actually called Crucial Conversations.
Yes.
So I'll walk you through some of those steps. But the second thing that I would say is lean in with your vulnerability. So lead with heart. It's just like marketing, like having that emotional connection. So saying something like, I'm really looking to be more diverse and inclusive with my marketing, with my organization. it came to my attention that, I haven't been as diverse as I could be. Can you help me understand, what are some ways that maybe I can be more inclusive of, X, and whatever that is for you based on, what you've noticed in your organization. Maybe it's more women, maybe it's more ethnic diversity, whatever it is. But I think you lead with, hey, I'm trying I've noticed something. I've noticed an opportunity within my organization. I'm trying to learn and understand how we can make this better. What thoughts do you have around this? I think is a great way to lead into a conversation where that person knows that you're looking to learn and you're looking to make an improvement. And I don't know about you, but anyone that leads with that, I'm like, sure, how can I help? You're trying to be better. I want to share whatever I know that may be of service to you. So those would be my tips for starting that kind of conversation.
So good. So helpful. Thank you. That was
You're
brilliant.
welcome. You're
Tell
welcome.
us about, so I want you to share all the places that people can connect with you. And I also know that you've got a conference coming up, which sounds incredible. So yes, tell us about your conference. Tell us where we can connect with you. So I know people are going to want to.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, you can connect with me at careerthrivers.com. So it's THRIVERS. And the name is simple. We believe that we spend most of our working hours in our career, and it is our hope that you aren't just surviving in your career, but that you're thriving. So we're at careerthrivers.com. And right now, if you go on the website, you'll see all of the information about our Thrive Together Con 2020. So our conference is a leadership development conference. It's for entrepreneurs, it's for 9-to-5 working professionals, or if you're doing both. We have some amazing speakers traveling in, also local to Nashville, Tennessee, that will be in attendance. It's May the 29th and 30th. So it's a Friday and Saturday. And all of the details are at careerthrivers.com. We also have a few openings, I think about 17 left for vendor spots. So if you are a small business owner and you are interested in raising the visibility of your brand, growing your business, make sure you check out that option as well.
So amazing. Oh my gosh. Well, thank you so much, Brittany, just for sharing so generously and for getting into the details with how we can be more inclusive and be more intentional with our team, with our culture, with our marketing. It's just, it's so on my mind and present for me this year. And I know it is for a lot of other people too. And so thank you so much just for shedding some light on how we can do this. I really appreciate your generosity and everything you shared.
Happy to do so. And thank you for having me on your podcast. I hope to very soon, sooner rather than later, be able to return the favor. I'm launching a podcast this year. So I'm super, super excited about it. So more to come.
Oh my gosh. I love it. Well, you'll have to fill me in as soon as it launches. That's so exciting because I know it's going to be awesome. So thank you so much again.
Thank you. Take care.